Hello, my name is Margarita Hughes Assink, and I will be presenting my final project entitled Preserving Ethnic Racial Identity for Youth in Care. Just a brief overview of our agenda. I'll start with an introduction, followed by a review of my PICO. I'll review our planning phase, in addition to intervention and methodology. We'll review our evaluation results and wrap up with the MPLD impact. So just a little about myself to start off. I'm fourth generation within the United States for my family. I identify as a Chicana with Mexican and Irish roots. I come from a strong two-parent household. I was born and raised in Western Michigan, where I've chosen to raise my own family. And I have over 15 years of child welfare experience. And in addition to my roles and titles as a mother and a wife, I identify as a fierce advocate for our families in care. In reviewing the why behind my project, I would have to introduce you all to my children. Now, not all of these youth are biologically mine, but I've had a hand in raising all of them. The first individual that you see is Luis. Luis is a 20-year-old young man who I have known since he was about in 6th grade. And that's when he was introduced to my daughter, and the two have been inseparable ever since. Luis is a dreamer, both literally and figuratively. He came to the United States at a young age with his mother and was raised in a single-parent household. During his senior year of high school, his mother was deported, and he was left behind. I took that time to really think about his future, and my husband and I agreed to move him into our household so that he could finish out high school and pursue his dreams. Luis has now graduated from high school. He's in the process of receiving his barber's license. He has a clothing line that he has started and is just all around an amazing young man. But in getting to that point, Luis had to endure a lot of obstacles, many of which included immersing himself into our family culture and learning how to act within our own household. He came from a single-parent household, moving into a two-parent household. He was used to his mother cooking for him authentic Mexican cuisine while I can barely boil water. And he was used to being the man of the house, having a hand in raising his younger siblings. Coming to our home, I wanted Luis just to focus on his studies and enjoy being a kid. We had some ups and downs and obstacles, but at the end of the day, Luis began sharing more of himself with my family. He's teaching my younger children Spanish. He's even shared some of his recipes with me and trying to teach me how to cook. The next individual you see is my daughter, Ava. Ava's 20 years old, and she is a senior at Grand Valley State University. She'll be graduating in April with her bachelor's degree in social work. I raised Ava for many years as a single parent. And when she was between the ages of 10 and 12, she decided to start spending some time one-on-one with her biological father. By this time, he had remarried and was living in a different state. He had additional children that Ava was forced to really develop a new relationship with. During these times, I remember getting a lot of late night phone calls from Ava in distress that these people don't know me. There's nothing here that's familiar. Even their house smells different. And she had to learn how to balance within their family culture while she felt they did not take the time to learn her own. The next child you see is my stepdaughter, Adriana. Adriana is now 10 years old. And since she was 1, I've had a hand in raising her. She would spend the traditional every other weekend and every other holiday with her father and I and our children here in our home, and was primarily raised by her mother in Mansalona, Michigan. For those of you not familiar with Mansalona, I liken it to Mayberry from the Andy Griffith Show. There's probably one stop sign, not even a stoplight. There is virtually no diversity in that area. I think I'm the first person of color that Adriana actually met. So when she was approximately 6, her father and I gained full custody of her and moved her into our home full-time. This was a culture shock to Adriana. She was now attending a school that was very diverse. Not only did she have Latinx and Hispanic children, she had Black and African American children, Asian American children. And this was completely different for her. Starting off, I could see just a difference in her overall mood. And I noticed she wasn't really eating. And I had to ask her, Adriana, what's going on? Are you sad? Is it that you miss your mom? And she said, no, Mama, your food is just way too spicy and I can't eat it. So it really made me think in how we can better alter our household to make her more comfortable and start to better respect where she comes from and who she is. I ensure that she always has pictures of her mother and her siblings up in her room so that can make her feel comfortable. And I make sure to always have ketchup on our dinner table to accommodate her dietary needs. And in turn, this girl has learned to put just about everything in a tortilla because everything's better as a taco. Finally, you see our youngest, Santino. Santino's 7 years old, and do not let the blonde hair and blue eyes fool you. He is biologically my son. And Santino will tell you he is a proud Latino, even though to society, he is white. So in looking at him, that's what you see. But for Santino, every day is a balance of who he feels he is on the inside versus what society is telling him he is. Reviewing my PICO, what my thought was, if services specialists, and that would include foster care or children's protective services specialists, are trained on the importance of culture and receive and use an individualized racial, cultural identity and connection plan structure for youth based on their developmental and age stages, and they work to maintain this document with updates, will there be improved levels of engagement with the biological family? And will they report that our youth have an improved sense of cultural community identity and that there are higher levels of cultural awareness and competency, not just amongst our staff, but also amongst our foster and adoptive parents? Now, in discussing ethnic racial identity, we had to look at what that means. The definition we used is ethnic racial identity is going to include our attitudes and our beliefs that an individual holds about their racial or ethnic group. And that's going to include the psychological well-being based on the group's physical characteristics and shared cultural heritage. Now, it's important to note, too, that ethnic racial identity is important for our young people, but particularly for our youth who are members of minority groups. And we know that it develops throughout their adolescence and is passed from one generation to the next. It's influenced by popular media, by our literature, and by the current events. Now, this may play a larger role amongst our minority youth, and that's because they're experiencing that contrasting and dominant culture of the majority ethnic group. However, it may not even be recognized or acknowledged by youth who are members of minority groups. So this really pushed me to think, if this is so important for our youth, and I can understand the role that it played even in my own upbringing, what's happening to our youth experiencing foster care when they have those loss of connections, when they don't have access to those generations to pass down the traditions and beliefs? In a review of the literature, I looked at the stages of development, and it was learned that ethnic identity actually begins at birth, and it will form over the course of a child's lifespan. Cross actually provided a 5-stage model of ethnic identity formation for children of color and how this can differ from white children. So those stages will include the pre-encounter phase, an encounter phase, full immersion, followed by internalization and commitment, and finally political activity. Now, it was important to note that these stages don't necessarily have to happen in order. Not all are set on a specific period of time, and any individual could move back and forth throughout this process. Now, while the literature did state that our cultural norms will differ for various groups of people, there was one similarity, one commonality for all groups, and that's racial ethnic identity is built through our connections and relationships. So again, what did this mean for our youth experiencing foster care? So some of the implications of a lack of ethnic racial identity for our children experiencing foster care is that this would lead to lower levels of social well-being, lower levels of self-esteem, a harm to self-image, a loss of language, and fewer coping skills. So if we could establish cultural responsiveness in child welfare and include some culturally competent practices, that could lead to strengthening a child's ethnic racial identity. And what would that mean for our youth? It would mean that we could find lower levels of aggressive behaviors, higher levels of self-esteem, and lower levels of depression. This could lead to higher GPAs and lower levels of drug and alcohol abuse. Now, these ring very strongly for me identifying as a Chicana, because I know that our Latinx youth have higher levels of school dropout rates and higher levels of teen pregnancy rates. So what's the answer? My proposal included training child welfare staff on the importance of ethnic racial identity and how our youth could potentially suffer if this is not supported. But not to stop there, I also wanted to provide child welfare staff with a specific tool to help them really better identify the important pieces of a child's culture and identity. For my data collection, I was able to complete 3 sessions of ethnic racial identity and cultural connections trainings. Now, 2 of these sessions were offered in person, while 1 was offered virtually. I had a total of 39 participants. Following the training, a retrospective survey was sent to all participants, and I was able to receive 23 surveys that were completed. The training lasted approximately 3 hours, and we covered various topics, including the importance of race and culture in the world of child welfare. We looked at the definitions of culture and ethnic racial identity, the formation of ethnic racial identity. We reviewed cultural norms and values for different races and ethnicities. We also talked about the implications of a loss of cultural identity for our youth experiencing foster care, in addition to how we can work to maintain ethnic racial identity of children experiencing foster care. Through that, we addressed the expected outcomes, and we finally presented that cultural identity and connections plan. Now, the plan that I was able to put together can really be used at any time throughout a youth experience in foster care. It's best suited to start right at the beginning of a child's experience, but this is something that could also be picked up for our youth who have been in care over a period of time. This is a plan that should be updated regularly, at least quarterly, but even if we could do semi-annually or annually. And there's 3 sections. The first section is focused on the youth. The next section is for the biological parents. And that final section is for the new caregivers. Now, youth are asked to address the following within their section. We want to know what that youth already knows about their culture and what makes them feel closest to their culture. We want to know what they love about their culture and what they would like to share with their next caregiver. They're also asked to describe various aspects of their culture and to share specific languages that they speak or foods that they eat. Now, our biological parents are asked to address some aspects as well. We want to know what are some of the things that make you and your child unique? And why is embracing your child's cultural heritage important to you? We also want to know what parents have already taught their child about his, her, their culture. Additionally, it's important to ask our biological family, what are some family or cultural traditions that you would like to see continue while your child is placed in out-of-home care? And they're also asked to identify biological family or their kinship network. We're taking these people's names and their contact information and ensuring that that's kept with the child. Because as many of us know, when we have family members come forward and offer to provide placement, if they don't pass through the agency's checks and they're not approved, they often are left behind. And how can we work to better engage these family members to participate in case planning, or really just act as a support to our children or our biological parents experiencing foster care? Now, for the new caregivers, we want them to address the following. We want them to identify their community relationships. Now, that's going to include organizations or programming that can better provide education or support that relationship between that new parent and the child. We also want to outline cultural connection events and activities. What can be done in and outside of the home to ensure that the youth has access to their culture? Finally, we want to create an action plan. We want specific goals that we're going to meet. We want to know how our families are going to continue to find out about cultural events in the local community. So this would look like, what are you going to do once the service providers or the social workers are out of your life? What are you going to do so this continues? And which events could we continue to invite family members or elders to, or at least provide some memorabilia for? And finally, what activities will you have in your home to ensure your child's culture is present every day? We want to outline what are the responsibilities of your fostering community, your people. Who's going to help you support this, and what are they going to do to help you support that? We also want to look at any potential barriers or roadblocks to maintaining this plan. So again, following the presentation of the Cultural Connections Plan, all staff were invited to put that plan to use with their current clients and then share their feedback through yet another survey. So let's review some evaluation results. This would be from our retrospective survey that followed the training. So participants were asked to rate their understanding of various aspects before and after the training. So just regarding that definition of culture, we had 48% state that they had a moderate understanding of the definition of culture, while 52% stated they had a high understanding. Following the training, that increased to 96%, reporting a high understanding, with 4.5% stating a moderate understanding. An understanding of the impact that culture has on parenting. Now, 4% of participants stated they had a low understanding. And on the other side of that, we had about 43% state that there was a high understanding, with 56% felt they had a moderate in the middle. After that training, we reached 87% in reporting a high understanding of that impact of culture on parenting, and a 13% as a moderate. The understanding and impact that our cultural identity has on our mental health. We had 8% of our participants saying they had a low understanding, and 56% stating a high, with 39% right in the middle at a moderate. Following that training, we increased 77% having a high understanding, and 23% stating they had a moderate understanding. Now, moving to an understanding of the impact of the loss of connections for our children experiencing foster care, we were almost split before the training. So we had 44% stating there was a moderate understanding, while 56% indicated a high understanding. And following that training, we bumped up to an 87% having a high understanding, and reduced down to 13% with a moderate understanding. Now, having an understanding of the importance of developing an understanding of the culture of the families that they work with and support. 4% had a low understanding, with 43% at a high understanding and 52% at a moderate. Following that training, 83% of participants were able to say that they had a high understanding of this importance, while 22% reported having a moderate. Some additional findings from the surveys. We had an increase in the following areas, and having an understanding for the appreciation of their own culture as participants. And an increase up to 91% for our participants then stated they had an appreciation of cultural identity of others. Now, before the training, only 65% of our participants felt they had an understanding of the disproportionality that is present in child welfare. And after the training, we were able to increase that to 91%. We also saw an increase in the areas of an ability to identify cultural norms of racial groups outside of our own cultures, and an ability to develop strategies to better engage a client of a different culture. Now, following the pilot of the Connections Plan, we did release an additional survey, and we received 6 total responses. And those came from our foster care staff, adoption staff, supervisors and managers, a representative from the Division of Child Welfare licensing staff in Michigan, and one individual who was a National Permanency Strategic Initiative lead and DEI expert. Now, all of these respondents reported using the plan on their own, which means they did not pilot it with any individuals or families, but they did report the following. So regarding working to maintain the cultural connections of children and youth while using this plan, our respondents did report an increased confidence and comfort. They all reported intentions to use the plan and a belief that this plan could lead to improved levels of engagement with birth families. Additionally, they reported that they felt this plan could improve a youth's sense of cultural community identity, could lead to higher levels of cultural awareness and competency amongst staff and amongst our foster and adoptive parents. And they all thought that would help meet the needs of children and families. So my findings from my research and my project were very similar to my initial hypothesis, in that with more education, staff reported higher levels of awareness. Now, some of the challenges or limitations for my project were just the number of participants. I would have liked to reach a higher number of participants. We were restricted by some of the time that we had. And the use of Connections Plan, I would have just liked to see more engagement or some engagement with either individuals or bio parents. Some of the lessons that I learned in putting forth my project, I did learn that when given the right tools, our child welfare staff will make that additional effort to support the families that they serve. But I also found that additional education and supports are needed to better increase that cultural competency and build up child welfare staff. I did find that staff weren't having the conversations, these crucial conversations about race, because they weren't prepared. They did not feel personally prepared to have those conversations, and those aren't occurring at a local level in our agencies. So I think with the right education and support and training, we'll build up our staff so they are better capable and feel more comfortable and confident in having those crucial conversations. Some of the next steps that I'm going to take. I'm going to be offering this training within my region to our Business Service Center 3. Following, I'll be meeting with our Office of Workforce Development and Training to see how we can offer this particular training to new child welfare staff, but also to some of our veteran staff, and that would be throughout the state. And finally, I'm constantly looking for more opportunities to educate new and veteran staff on this topic. MPLD has really provided me with the voice that I thought I had lost, and has pushed me to really dig deeper and ask why, and not just accept the answers that I'm given. It's supported my personal and my professional growth and helped to better establish my seat at the table. In my family, I'm the first generation with a college degree. I love to know that my daughter can now say my parents' highest level of education is a master's degree, as I'm currently the only member of my family with a master's degree. And I know that I act as a role model to not just my children, but my nieces, my nephews, my cousins, and they can see everything that's possible. My father was a migrant farm worker and has worked from a very young age. And at the age of 11, he lost his father, and he had to work that much harder to help support his 12 brothers and sisters. And he gave up a college education so he could marry my beautiful mother and raise their children together. Within my Latinx community, we're often taught to be humble, keep your head down, work hard, that recognition is not necessarily important. With this project, I was pushed to be recognized and show just how far we can go. My parents were elated to see me get a job within the state of Michigan approximately 15 years ago, because this had health benefits that were probably much more than they would have been able to provide. And they told me just to keep going with that because it was such a great opportunity. But I want to push further, and I want to show them just how much more is out there. So to my parents, I tell you, look, we did this and we made it that much further. To my children, I want to give them the message of never stop letting others know just who you are, but also where you came from. To my MPLD family, to my mentor, to all the Adoptive Kids staff, I want to say thank you. Thank you for always reminding me to straighten my crown and to say not only do I have a seat at this table, I belong here at the head of the table. And to my cohort 5 fellows, I want to leave you with this. Cree en ti y mismo serás imparable. Believe in yourself and you will be unstoppable. Attached, you can see my references. Thank you.